Slaves of Rome were prisoners of war, including their families. Sailors that were captured and sold by pirates, debtors, or slaves that had been bought from outside of the empire. A citizen could even sell their own children into slavery during hard times. If a child's mother was a slave, the child too would be considered a slave, regardless of whoever was the father. Slaves were seen as objects, the property of who owned them, as in their masters. They were used as a way to measure and flex a citizen's wealth. The higher quantity of slaves that the master had, and the more exotic that they were, meant that the master was generally more wealthy and was held in higher esteem than other masters. Slavery was justified by Romans being a superior culture, and slaves were also seen as living proof of this, being seen in a if they were strong enough to be the best, then they would not be slaves sort of light.
Slaves were given a wide variety of jobs depending on their skills and if they had experience with the previous occupation. How much they were worth varied according to this as well. A young man was usually worth a good sum because they were still in their prime and fit to do manual labor. If a slave was uneducated, they would get a job in the fields doing agriculture or a job doing more menial tasks like cupbearing. Educated slaves, usually Greek, were given jobs such as tutors, architects, or other jobs of that sort. Slaves adept at combat would be taken in by gladiator patrons and made to fight in gladiator combat. The worst behaving slaves were sent to the mines, where they would work until they died, where death could be sudden and unexpected since they were not working in the safest of conditions.
Slaves were not treated well during the early Roman period and continued to be treated poorly throughout the duration of Rome. However, in the days of the Roman Empire, there were Romans that believed they should treat their slaves well because their slaves would work harder for them. This was a sentiment brought on by Seneca, a Roman philosopher that studied Stoicism. Masters that practiced Seneca's attitude towards slavery would treat slaves kindly and even give their slaves allowances, if not for the actual belief of equality, then for the slaves to have an incentive to work harder.
The difference between Roman slavery and slavery of other cultures was that Roman slavery included manumission. Manumission is the possibility for slaves to be freed of their bondage. This was only possible if the master freed the slave themselves, or the slave paid the master the same amount that the master bought the slave for. That was virtually impossible for a slave, however. Gladiators could be freed if a gladiator bravely distinguished himself in a particular fight, or at some periods during Roman history, had won 5 fights. The symbol of a freed gladiator was a rudis, a wooden sword gifted to the gladiator as proof he has achieved his freedom. A freed slave could have the right of a plebeian citizen, and even own slaves of their own. Manumission would often be used more as incentive for the slaves to work harder than be an actual possibility, though.